Here's a segment from a recent Gun Talk radio episode. You can listen to all the Gun Talk radio podcasts however you tune in, or check out guntalk.com for more. We are in the middle of a tornado or hurricane, a maelstrom, if you will, in the gun rights, gun law, gun lawsuit world. And it's centered in several different places around the country, but one that's a real hotbed that's been fascinating and spooky to watch is out in Oregon. What's going on with that Measure 114? We've talked about it for weeks and weeks and weeks and told you that on December the 8th, gun sales simply stopped. Well, something happened. We got a reprieve, a pause, something. Joining me right now to kind of fill in the blanks and kind of cover that and a lot of other things, Adam Kraut is the fairly new executive director of the Second Amendment Foundation. Adam, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom.
You bet. So, I mean, it's been like a whipsaw back and forth with this Oregon thing. I mean, I know that there are a lot of things going on in different places, but why don't we start there? Can you kind of bring us up to speed of how it all went down and where we are?
Yeah, I can try to do my best on that. So this past election cycle, Oregon had a ballot measure, Measure 114, and among other things, it would, if passed, which it ultimately was, would have required purchase permits prior to being able to purchase a firearm. One would have to get one of those. And it also banned magazines, the possession of and manufacture and purchasing and transfer of magazines that were capable of holding more than 10 rounds. So after that was passed, there have been 5 total lawsuits, 4 which are in federal court and 1 that I'm aware of that's in state court that were filed against this ballot measure in some form or fashion. And it's been it's been quite the ride seeing all these different challenges come in, and very quickly after that was put into effect.
Well, you had the federal court judge ruled in basically, put a fine point on, ruled in favor of 114, ruled against gun rights and gun owners, and said it could go forward. And then, I think it was even the same day, a judge in, I think it was Haney County, Oregon, said, no, we're going to put a pause on this, a TRO, I think it was, what came in. Mm-hmm. But it's been okay, not just changing day to day, but almost within the day.
Yeah, so one of the things that, after that measure was passed was everybody was struggling to try to figure out when the implementation date was, and it soon became clear that it was within a month, so December 8th is when that actually became effective. Now, as you said, the federal courts, the tract has taken a little bit of a different turn here. So all of those cases are now before the same judge. It's not consolidated yet anyway, but all those cases are before the same judge. In the federal court system, the judge denied the TROs against the magazine capacity issue. And in that same opinion, and this was in the OFF case that was filed, stayed the implementation of the permitting system for 30 days. So January 6th, at least in the federal court track, is when that would become effective. In the state court, however, in that case, the judge, as you mentioned, did issue a temporary restraining order. There's actually a hearing, I believe it's scheduled for the 13th on the preliminary injunction, and that TRO was only good for 10 days. So we'll see how that shakes out. Not to look at a crystal ball or anything, but generally if a TRO is issued, I have a fairly hard time believing that a preliminary injunction would not follow that. But stranger things have happened. So,
yeah, because there was, one lawsuit from the Oregon Firearms Federation, 1 from GOA, 2 from the Second Amendment Foundation, and 1 from NSSF, if I remember the lineup.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay, well, so obviously, Second Amendment Foundation, your group, our group, has 2 of those in there. Hardly the only 2 that you have going. And for those who don't know, you are a Second Amendment attorney. You've been doing this for a while. You know the landscape out there. Even though it feels like a setback a bit, what's going on in Oregon, overall, it feels to me like we are really making some headway. I mean, especially to see what's going on out in California. How do you see it right now?
Yeah, I think so. After obviously Bruin was decided this summer, it certainly has changed the legal landscape in a lot of ways for the better. Particularly the magazine issue. So California had several challenges to that prior to Bruin, and now after Bruin, those are back down at the trial courts being dealt with. But as these states continue to implement measures like this, you look at the test that was spelled out in Bruin. So it's the text of the Second Amendment as informed by the nation's history and tradition. And so the first thing that, according to the Supreme Court and what most of the groups had argued since Heller was that you need to look at the plain text of the Second Amendment and is that conduct covered? If the answer to the question is yes, then it's protected, and it's up to the state to show that there is a historical either law that's identical or an analog where you could say this is similar enough to the modern day restriction in order to justify the restriction's existence. You look at something like magazines, for instance. Courts have, to my knowledge, in any case where magazines have been an issue, have universally declared that they're arms. So they're arms and they're protected under the Second Amendment as such. And all the previous bans were upheld under that two-step test that, the Supreme Court had said, no, you're wrong, this is not the way to do it. So I think broadly, if we're looking at something like types of firearms that are in common use or types of arms, magazines, for instance, there's a lot of headway to be made. It's just waiting for the courts to kind of go back and do it all over again.
Yeah, we're going to have to go through the process again. So what just happened out in California with the Attorney General pulling out of a case and saying, I cannot defend the state in this case?
Yeah, so in that case, for those that don't know that law, the state of California modeled a very fee-shifting provision. So if you brought a challenge on a Second Amendment basis, and even if you won most of the claims, so say your case had 5 claims, even if you won 4 of the 5 and you lost on one, the state or whoever the defendants were could go after the plaintiffs and their attorneys for attorney's fees in that. Essentially, what they did was they took Texas's SB 8 and modeled legislation on that. So rather than dealing with abortion, they turned it into firearms. And what's interesting about that is that the Attorney General of California very clearly on multiple occasions said what Texas did was unconstitutional, and yet now was in a position anyway of trying to explain to a court why what California is doing is perfectly, constitutional to do. So,
and we should add that, and California was not at all shy about saying we are modeling this one exactly after Texas. This is basically a revenge law, and if Texas's law gets struck down, then maybe we'll look at this. But basically, we're doing this as a way to pile on to and copy the Texas abortion law, which, as you say, the Attorney General numerous times said the Texas law is unconstitutional. So I guess he came back and said, well, if that one's unconstitutional and this one's identical, maybe I can't defend this.
Well, and he was also being, I think, pressed by the court pretty hard on that very question. If you're saying that law in Texas is unconstitutional, how is this possibly constitutional, particularly when you've modeled it based off that? Mm-hmm. So the Attorney General, has kind of said that he's not going to defend that law, and the governor filed a motion to intervene. And I forget what the schedule is off the top of my head, but that motion I know was granted, and briefing is to ensue in a very short order here on that.
Right, and there are others. Generally speaking, after Bruin, and I'm not a lawyer, don't play one on TV, but it seemed to me that almost all the laws that banned semi-automatic, if you will, assault weapons or magazine capacity limits have to go away when measured against what the Supreme Court said in Bruin. Is that too much wishful thinking?
I don't think it's wishful thinking. I think it's just a matter of whether the judges will faithfully apply the test that was spelled out in Bruin or not. So that'll be, I think, the determining factor there. But based on the very clear test that was set out in Bruin, I don't see how those laws can continue to stand.
Well, that's excellent news. As we head toward the new year, we have a lot to look forward to.
Plenty to do and no shortage. The only thing that we're short on is time.
Well, and money. It's time and money, which often are the same thing. They really are. So, all right. So you're the new executive director at Second Amendment Foundation. You might just tell people, I don't know what we have, 2-3 dozen lawsuits we're involved in, maybe more than that. I don't know.
Yeah, so I've been working on trying to catalog the active litigation. Last I checked, there was between 40 to 50 cases that were active in some form or fashion. I'm going off the top of my head here, so I think that was the number I had arrived at. So we've been plenty busy, and I believe we'll certainly be adding to that list as municipalities or states continue to enact laws, and or we find things to challenge where people need assistance, and it fits within our mission.
Anything? I got about a minute left. Anything you'd want to add that you feel like people need to know, or you'd like to bring up to speed on?
Well, just that, if you believe that there is something out there that we could take a look at, feel free to contact us. You can head on over to the website. It's saf.org and contact us through that, and we'd be happy to take a look at, any issues that may arise. We're certainly aware of what some states are working on, and we're actively taking a look at, what constitutional issues may arise and how to challenge them in a successful manner. So.
And in addition to suggesting what they do, you can help them by, as Jim says, open your wallet and throw some money into the kitty, because it takes a lot of money to do these things. Absolutely. We would certainly love to have your support financially as well. There you go. Adam, thank you so much. Adam Kraut from the Second Amendment Foundation. It's SAF for Second Amendment Foundation, saf.org. Go over and take a look at all the things the group is doing. I think it is the lead group in litigation in gun rights these days. All right, open lines, 866-TALK-GUN. When we come back, I'll tell you about the gun school I just went to. Saw some really good things, saw some really bad things, and I'll relay all of those to you.